I guess my fondest and clearest memories of that time is that we were fucking green.
What if I told you one of the most influential albums of the entire 1980s was recorded for less money than many bands spend on a single music video today? No major label, almost no budget.
Yeah, I think it cost us, what, $3 grand to make, and we did it in just a couple days.
And a group of unknown musicians living in complete chaos somehow created the record that helped launch a rock revolution. Critics didn't know what to call it, radio barely touched it, and the music industry wasn't interested.
I don't want to say a mess, but it was a mess.
Yet that rough, reckless album would eventually go platinum and help change rock music forever.
Nobody knew what they were doing, which is, I think, is the beauty of that record.
So how did Mötley Crüe turn a low-budget underground release into the foundation of an entire era? 1981 was a strange moment for rock music. The wild ride of the 70s was officially over, but nobody could agree on what was supposed to come next. Punk had already exploded and burned through its first wave, leaving behind a scene caught between rebellion and image. Heavy metal was starting to gain ground, but the mainstream audience still wasn't fully on board with it. At the same time, new wave and post-punk were taking over the spotlight. Synthesizers were everywhere, paired with dark vocals and catchy rhythms that filled radio stations and clubs.
We were playing songs that we'd been playing live in clubs that were tested.
Even disco was still hanging around, refusing to completely disappear. Then, right in the middle of all that confusion, Mötley Crüe arrived like a crew of leather-jacketed outsiders, reckless, driven, and determined to make noise no matter who stood in their way.
Nobody overthought anything. Everybody just played.
Too Fast for Love didn't neatly fit into any category. It wasn't fully metal, it wasn't fully punk, and it definitely didn't have the polished shine of the new wave acts starting to dominate MTV. The album sounded rough around the edges, packed with power pop hooks, punk energy, and a hard rock attitude. Years later, people would slap the hair metal label on it, but back in 1981, nobody even had a name for what these guys were doing. Most people just saw it as loud, fast, and a little dangerous. Some critics have argued that Too Fast for Love had more in common with the gritty attitude of Nevermind the Bollocks than with the metal bands that followed. You could hear traces of the New York Dolls and the Stooges in the mix. But instead of fading away after a brief flash of attention, Mötley Crüe were focused on building something bigger and doing it on their own terms. They weren't known as technical masters, and they weren't exactly radio favorites either, but they had a clear vision. Armed with duct tape, spandex, confidence, and plenty of hustle, they genuinely believed they could force their way into the spotlight.
One day we just went in there and started messing around.
Van Halen had already opened a path for hard rock, but Los Angeles was still heavily influenced by flashy fashion, eyeliner, and synth-driven sounds. The local clubs were packed with bands that looked better suited for magazine photo shoots than hard rock stages. But Mötley Crüe had no interest in fitting in. They weren't accepted by the punk crowd, and they didn't belong in the new wave scene either. Instead of chasing approval, they created their own lane and made sure people noticed. With no record label backing them and little attention from the industry, the band took control of their own future. They started Leather Records and released Too Fast for Love themselves. There was no major promotion, barely any press, and almost no support. Still, clubs kept filling up night after night, proving that something was building fast. The Sunset Strip wasn't ready for them. Their look, attitude, and chaotic lifestyle made them stand out from nearly everyone around them. Even while struggling financially, they pushed forward with nonstop ambition and determination.
Let's do this. We were just like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, go.
By late 1981, after only about a year together, stories about the band were already spreading across Los Angeles. They gained a reputation as one of the wildest acts on the Strip, showing up with confidence, flashy style, and enough energy to leave people talking long after they were gone. What made it even more surprising was their lack of industry support. They had little experience and no traditional path to success, Yet they carried themselves like future stars. Even while sleeping on floors and barely getting by, they acted like making it big was only a matter of time.
A crowd favorite. It's been a band favorite for 30 years, you know.
The group shared a house that later became legendary through stories told in The Dirt. It was far from glamorous. Money was scarce, comfort was practically non-existent, and the place was known for being messy, crowded, and constantly packed with activity. The house became a symbol of the band's early days, equal parts struggle, chaos, and determination. Walking through the front door could feel like stepping into another world. Empty bottles seemed to be everywhere. People came and went at all hours, and nobody appeared too concerned with keeping things organized. The atmosphere was loud, unpredictable, and completely over the top. For outsiders, it probably looked like total madness. For Mötley Crüe, it was simply everyday life. Their strategy for success, if it could even be called a strategy, was brutally simple. Play every show with maximum intensity, chase every opportunity, and refuse to slow down. They believed there were only two possible outcomes. Either they would break through and become stars, or they would go down in spectacular fashion trying.
Searching for the right studio, you know, that we could afford, you know.
In their minds, there was no safe middle option. Motley Crüe weren't approaching the music business like careful planners or corporate-minded entrepreneurs either. They were driven by attitude, confidence, and an unshakable belief that they were destined for something bigger. The thought of fading into obscurity or settling into ordinary jobs was something they refused to accept. Music wasn't just a goal. It was the only path they were willing to take, and they chased it with everything they had. The 1980s were right around the corner, and Mötley Crüe was positioning itself to become one of the decade's most talked-about rock bands. But before the fame, the platinum records, and the sold-out arenas, there was Too Fast for Love, an album recorded the only way they knew how, quickly, cheaply, and with zero concern for perfection. There was no major label, no massive budget, and no high-end production team behind Mötley Crüe. The album was reportedly recorded for only about $2,500, a tiny amount even at the time. While other bands spent heavily chasing polished studio perfection, Mötley Crüe focused on capturing raw energy and getting their music out fast. Their manager, Alan Kaufman, wasn't a typical music industry insider either. Coming from a construction background, he entered the picture through personal connections. That unconventional path matched the band perfectly. Almost nothing about Mötley Crüe's early rise followed the usual rules, yet they kept finding ways to move forward. Money was always tight, but Kaufman and his wife helped keep things running while gathering enough funds to book studio time at Hit City West in Los Angeles. Once inside, the band moved quickly, reportedly recording the album in just 3 days and attacking every session with non-stop intensity. Engineer Glenn Feet handled the recordings, although fans still laugh about his name being misspelled as Gleen in the album credits. That small mistake reflected the project's do-it-yourself spirit. The focus wasn't perfection. It was getting the songs recorded and out to the fans. After recording wrapped, Michael Wagner mixed the album at Cherokee Studios. Even with his talent involved, Too Fast for Love was never meant to sound polished. Its rough edges, urgency, and raw attitude became part of its appeal, helping it stand out from many of the cleaner rock records that followed later in the decade. The album's first pressing was incredibly small by industry standards. Only around 900 copies were released on vinyl through the band's own Leather Records label because that was all they could afford at the time. There were no massive promotional campaigns, no expensive marketing plans, and no guarantee anyone outside Los Angeles would even hear it. Yet those few records helped start something much bigger than anyone could have predicted. What made Too Fast for Love stand out was that it didn't feel like a carefully manufactured product. It carried the rebellious spirit of punk, while adding a heavier, more aggressive edge. The result was a sound that felt unpredictable and exciting. For a debut album, it perfectly captured a band eager to make its mark and unwilling to follow anyone else's rules. The record didn't fit neatly into the metal scene of the early 1980s either. It wasn't designed to impress technical music purists, and it wasn't chasing radio-friendly trends. Mötley Crüe sounded different from almost everyone around them. Looking back, you can hear early hints of what would later become known as hair metal, but at the time there was no clear label for it. Instead, it came across as a strange but exciting mix of punk urgency, power pop melodies, and hard rock aggression. The guitars on Too Fast for Love growled and roared instead of chasing perfection. From the explosive opening of Live Wire to the closing moments of On With the Show, the album felt unpredictable and packed with the energy of a band determined to prove itself. Mick Mars played a major role in creating that sound. Rather than relying on flashy guitar tricks, he focused on grit, attitude, and memorable riffs. His solos were sharp, direct, and gave the songs exactly what they needed without overcomplicating things. That raw style became one of the band's signature strengths. Nikki Sixx helped shape the album's identity as its main songwriter and co-writer. Drawing from ideas he had developed over the years, he mixed catchy hooks with rebellious energy, creating songs that felt wild while still sticking in listeners' minds. That balance became one of the record's biggest advantages. Tommy Lee added non-stop power behind the drums. His hard-hitting style drove every song forward and gave the music a relentless pulse. Even during the band's most chaotic moments, his drumming kept everything moving with intensity and excitement. Vince Neil's vocals gave the band another distinctive edge. His mix of glam rock melody and punk attitude brought a rough, reckless energy that fit the music perfectly. Whether praised or debated by fans, his unpolished delivery helped give the album its unique personality and made the songs even more memorable. The album makes its intentions clear right away with Live Wire opening the show. There's no build-up or hesitation, just aggressive energy, a powerful Mick Mars riff, and a bold statement from a band that refused to wait for anyone's approval. Live Wire would go on to become one of the group's most recognizable songs, and it's easy to understand why. The chorus is incredibly memorable, sticking with listeners after just a few plays. What also makes the track stand out is the way it shifts gears. The song briefly pulls back into a darker, moodier section before accelerating once again, creating a dynamic structure that keeps the energy levels high throughout. Then comes Come On and Dance, a track that highlights the band's more unpredictable side. The verses move through an unusual progression that gives the song a strange, edgy feeling. It doesn't follow the most obvious path, yet everything somehow clicks together. The result is a track that feels gritty, rebellious, and completely in line with the album's rough-around-the-edges personality. When the chorus arrives, the song explodes into another gear. The band plays with tempo changes, shifting between different rhythmic feels to make the hook hit even harder. Those sudden changes help create excitement and keep the song from feeling predictable. It's another example of how Mötley Crüe found ways to stand out despite working with limited resources. Mick Mars delivers one of the standout guitar solos on the album with a style built on feel and attitude rather than technical showmanship. His playing sounds raw, unpredictable, and full of personality, giving the song an extra spark that perfectly matches its energy. Over the years, different versions of Too Fast for Love have featured noticeable changes. The original Leather Records release had rougher vocals and production choices, while later releases cleaned things up. Even with those differences, the songs never lost their powerful, rebellious spirit. After the album's intense opening, Public Enemy No. 1 brings a noticeable change in mood. Built around a simple but catchy guitar melody from Mick Mars, the song quickly grabs attention. Vince Neil takes a more melodic approach here, while still keeping the attitude that defined the band's early sound. The track also highlights the chemistry between the band members. Tommy Lee's energetic drumming drives everything forward, while Nikki Sixx's bass adds extra movement, especially during the chorus. The song's straightforward style is exactly what makes it so memorable. Originally planned to follow Live Wire, the song was later moved when Elektra became involved. Even so, it remained an important part of the album and showed how the band could blend punk energy, glam influences, and catchy hooks into something uniquely their own. Merry-Go-Round takes the album in a darker direction. While its repetitive chorus is instantly memorable, the song carries a heavier atmosphere beneath the surface. Inspired by difficult life struggles, the lyrics add emotional weight and reveal a side of the band that went beyond their growing party rock reputation. The song also helped make Too Fast for Love feel more diverse. Its eerie chord changes and dramatic mood created a lasting impact, showing early signs of the songwriting depth that would become an important part of Mötley Crüe's sound. From there, the album launches into Take Me to the Top, and suddenly the mood changes again. If Merry-Go-Round was introspective and shadowy, Take Me to the Top is pure ambition blasting through the speakers. This was the sound of a young band dreaming about massive stages, bright lights, and packed arenas long before they had reached that level of success. The song is packed with confidence, energy, and huge hooks. Even in its original form, it feels like one of the album's most polished moments. Later versions added extra punch, but the core of the track was already there from the start. The driving verses, explosive choruses, and dynamic shifts between slower and faster sections helped create a songwriting formula that would become increasingly important to Mötley Crüe's sound in the years ahead. One of the interesting things about Mötley Crüe's early songwriting was how often they played with tempo changes to make their choruses hit harder. In songs like Take Me to the Top, the band frequently shifted between slower-feeling sections and faster, more energetic bursts. Whether that approach was carefully planned or simply developed naturally, it became one of the group's early trademarks. Those changes gave the music extra impact and helped the choruses jump out at listeners. One thing that made Mötley Crüe stand out was their ability to create huge excitement with fairly simple arrangements. On the surface, the songs seemed straightforward, but there were plenty of unusual ideas underneath. Mick Mars often ignored traditional guitar rules, creating parts that sounded unique while still being catchy and easy to remember. Piece of Your Action is one of the album's heaviest moments. Built around a grinding groove and descending chord patterns, the song creates a tense, dangerous atmosphere that keeps building with every verse. The dramatic pauses and powerful riffs add even more impact, making the track impossible to ignore. Many fans see the song as an early preview of ideas that would later appear in tracks like Looks That Kill. The aggressive guitar work and confident attitude are already on full display. Mick Mars also adds slide guitar touches that give the song extra character and help it stand apart from other hard rock releases of the era. The guitar solo is another major highlight. Instead of focusing on speed or flashy techniques, Mars builds tension step by step, turning the solo into a dramatic centerpiece. As the intensity rises, the combination of powerful notes and stop-and-start rhythms creates one of the album's most memorable moments. After that, Starry Eyes reveals a more melodic side of the band. Packed with catchy hooks and strong melodies, the song leans into power pop influences while still keeping enough grit to fit the album's hard rock edge. That balance makes it one of the record's most distinctive tracks. The album then reaches its title track, Too Fast for Love, which originally existed in a longer and even more unconventional form. By this point, the record had already showcased the band's aggression, melody, and unpredictability, with the title track adding even more surprises to the mix. The original version of Too Fast for Love was a little different from the one many listeners eventually came to know. It had a more offbeat and dreamlike quality, leaning heavily into the band's power pop influences while still carrying plenty of rock and roll attitude. The song featured a longer introduction and ended with experimental guitar sounds that gave it a loose, unpredictable feel. Later revisions streamlined the track, making it tighter, heavier, and more direct for wider release. Even with those changes, many fans still appreciate the charm of the original recording. There was something about its rough, sprawling nature that perfectly reflected the spirit of early Mötley Crüe. It felt less controlled, less polished, and more like a snapshot of a hungry young band throwing every idea onto the table without worrying about conventions or expectations. At its heart, Too Fast for Love was an anthem no matter which version fans heard. The repeated too fast for love" hook made it easy to sing along to, while Vince Neil's distinctive vocals helped make the song instantly recognizable. The track also featured fun instrumental moments that gave each band member a chance to shine. The album closes with "On with the Show," a surprisingly dramatic finale. Right from the start, the song delivers a darker, more story-driven atmosphere than much of the record. Instead of focusing only on attitude and energy, it pulls listeners into a narrative filled with emotion and tension. That storytelling approach helped the song stand out. It showed that Mötley Crüe could do more than deliver loud, high-energy rock tracks. They could also create songs with depth, atmosphere, and a strong emotional impact. Musically, the track keeps things simple but effective, with a powerful chorus that gives the album a satisfying sense of closure. After all the chaos and intensity that came before it, On with the Show feels like a final curtain call. It wraps up the album while hinting that even bigger things were ahead for the band. Another notable part of the album's history is "Stick to Your Guns," Mötley Crüe's first single. Although it was removed from the later Elektra version, many fans still view it as one of the record's most interesting missing tracks because of its energy, shifting moods, and strong, rock-driven sound. "Stick to Your Guns" felt completely rooted in the atmosphere of early Los Angeles rock music. It carried the gritty attitude, swagger, and rough edges that defined Mötley Crüe's earliest days. Interestingly, the song actually predated the formation of the band itself, with Nikki Sixx bringing it into the group from material he had written earlier. According to various accounts, Sixx even sold part of the publishing rights to the well-known Sunset Strip figure Kim Fowley for a relatively small amount of money, a decision that has become a fascinating footnote in the band's history. Fans still debate whether "Stick to Your Guns" should have stayed on Too Fast for Love. Some believe it deserved a spot on the final album, while others think the revised track list worked better without it. Either way, its removal highlights the difference between Mötley Crüe's fully independent beginnings and the more polished Elektra release that reached a wider audience. For many longtime followers, the song remains an important piece of the band's early identity. It captured the raw energy and rebellious spirit that defined their first recordings, which is why its absence is still discussed today. Another early track, "Toast of the Town," also missed out on the final album. Originally released as the B-side to the "Stick to Your Guns" single, it came from the same period when the band was handling much of its own business and doing whatever it could to get music into fans' hands. Like many of their early songs, "Toast of the Town" was packed with energy, confidence, and attitude. For years, it remained a hidden favorite among dedicated fans before finally reaching a larger audience when it was added as a bonus track on the 1999 remastered edition of Too Fast for Love. The band's impact went far beyond the music. Mötley Crüe looked completely different from most acts on the Los Angeles scene, showing up in tight spandex, leather, metal studs, towering hair, and dramatic makeup. Whether people loved the look or not, it got attention fast and made the band impossible to forget. Their style helped separate them from many of the punk holdovers and European-inspired new wave acts that were popular around Hollywood at the time. According to stories from those involved in the scene, early supporters recognized that Mötley Crüe was tapping into something different. While many artists were chasing current trends, the band was creating a look and identity that felt uniquely their own. Then there was the album cover itself, which became almost as memorable as the music inside. The black and white artwork featured imagery that paid tribute to classic rock influences while adding a rougher, more rebellious edge. It perfectly reflected the themes that ran throughout the record: attitude, danger, excess, confidence, and a determination to push boundaries. Before listeners even dropped the needle onto the vinyl, the cover already gave them a clear warning about the kind of experience they were about to get. At the time, Mötley Crüe's image was seen as extremely wild by industry standards. Their flashy look, rebellious attitude, and refusal to play by the usual rules made many record executives hesitant. While the band was gaining serious attention on the Sunset Strip, plenty of people still viewed them as a risky gamble rather than future stars. By early 1982, though, the numbers were hard to ignore. Despite having no major label backing, limited promotion, and little radio support, Too Fast for Love had reportedly sold around 20,000 copies. The band was also drawing large crowds at clubs, proving that demand for their music was growing fast. That momentum eventually caught the attention of Elektra Records. After signing the band, the label wanted to make the album more competitive commercially and brought in respected producer Roy Thomas Baker, known for his work with major rock acts. The move looked promising, but it also created controversy. Baker was famous for polished productions, while Mötley Crüe's appeal came from raw energy and rough edges. After the remix, some band members felt part of the album's original spirit had been lost. Vince Neil later suggested the cleaner sound removed some of its early grit. When the remixed version was released in 1982, it introduced the album to a much larger audience. Fans have debated ever since which version is better, the raw Leather Records release or the cleaner Elektra edition. Either way, one thing was clear: signing with Elektra changed everything and launched the band into a whole new level of success. Commercially, though, the album did not become an instant blockbuster. It managed to reach number 77 on the Billboard chart in the United States, but failed to generate major chart success elsewhere. At the time, mainstream audiences were still catching up to the band's unique style, and many industry observers hadn't fully realized what was developing in Los Angeles. Too Fast for Love didn't become successful through massive promotion or radio support. Instead, it spread through word of mouth, live shows, and loyal fans sharing the music. As stories about Mötley Crüe's wild performances grew, more people started paying attention to the band. Everything changed when Shout at the Devil arrived in 1983 and pushed Mötley Crüe to a new level of fame. Suddenly, fans began looking back at Too Fast for Love not as a rough independent release, but as the starting point of something much bigger. What began as a self-funded project eventually became a cult classic. By 1986, the album had gone platinum, completing an incredible rise from low-budget debut to influential rock record. Its success helped open the door for many bands that would later dominate the Sunset Strip scene. The album's influence is still recognized today. Many fans and critics see Too Fast for Love as one of the key records that helped shape the glam metal explosion of the 1980s. Its impact reached far beyond Mötley Crüe and inspired countless bands that followed. Even now, fans still debate the original Leather Records version versus the Elektra remix. Some prefer the raw, untamed sound of the original, while others enjoy the cleaner production. More than 40 years later, the album remains a powerful example of hungry, rebellious rock music that helped launch an era. Looking back, it's clear that this album was the spark that helped ignite something much bigger. When Too Fast for Love hit the streets on November 10th, 1981, few people could have predicted what was coming next. But that release marked the beginning of a journey that would change Mötley Crüe's future and leave a lasting mark on rock history. Now I want to hear from you. Which version of Too Fast for Love do you prefer? The original Leather Records release or the Elektra remix? And what's your favorite track from the album? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future rock history breakdowns and album retrospectives.